Welcome into Fantasy Focus. My name is Daniel Dopp, joined by Field Yates. It's the two best friends doing another show together. Field, we're talking about running backs today. Last week, we did a huge deep dive on the quarterback position with Mike Clay. If you did not listen to that, make sure you go back and check that out. But we're diving into running backs today. But first, Field, before we get to any of this content, I just want to ask you, how you doing, man? I love seeing your face once a week here on the show.
Yeah, right back to you, Daniel. And for those that are asking, yes, Mike was kicked off today's show because we thought he just didn't really hold up his end of the bargain last week.
Are those the leagues that you're drafting that second quarterback just in case there was an injury risk there? Mike Clay? That's a Mike Clay question.
Oh, me? Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
sorry.
Mike, when he says your name, right, yeah.
I was thinking about I was thinking about where I could order a piano, what songs I could learn on the piano. So that's where my head was.
So if Mike, through back channels like our group text, is able to show us this week that he has the fantasy chops to be back on the show next week, he will be back. And how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm recovering from a pretty wicked pickleball accident I had in West Hartford.
Yeah, you mentioned this to me like 30 seconds before the show started. If you just told me like I had a pretty wicked fill in the blank accident, I got to figure pickleball would be like the 1 zillionth thing that I would have guessed would lead to an accident. So what the heck happened? All
right, so I'll be real quick about this, but for those that don't know, obviously pickleball sweeping the nation over the last couple of years.
All the rage.
It's a lot of fun to be able to go out. You're outside. I went with my buddy Damian Dabrowski, who you obviously know. Field worked here for a long time at ESPN. Damian. Love Damian. So we went to West Hartford, Lil Weehaw, and start playing. First game, we get crushed 0-11. Because it's our first game back. We didn't know any better, right? It was tough, to be honest. Second game, we lost 8-11. So it was like we got a lot better. We, much more respectable in the scoring situation. Third game, we are dominating. We're up 7-0, and I feel bad because the people that we're playing against, you can tell they're kind of beginners. So we went from playing like two super tough teams to someone that's like kind of learning it. So there was a ball. Imagine it's like tennis, no different than tennis in case you don't play pickleball. There was a ball that was going up over my head, and I was pretending like I was going to go get it, but it was a little bit too far. It was going to be back and out of bounds. So rather than swing at it, I took my racket and I just swung it back toward me, just ever so slightly. But when I did that, I swung it back right into my head.
Oh, God.
And so I felt this big bonk happen, and I was like, man.
You're in protocol.
That doesn't feel good. Go through, bend over, and I pick up the ball. I turn around, and Damian looks at me with this look of horror I have never seen on his face. And he's like,
hospital?
Daniel. And all of a sudden, I feel warm start to run down my face. Field, it got to the point, I don't know if you ever saw Firestarter, but it was like,
I didn't.
I was Carrie at the end of the movie when they poured like pig's blood all over here during prom. It was so unbelievably disgusting. I felt awful. All the pickleball courts stopped. I had blood pouring down my face. It was pooling in my hands as I walked off the courts, like trying to make sure no one else saw it. It was probably the worst sports injury that I have ever had.
Wow.
Luckily it was 8:10 p.m. and urgent care closes at 8 o'clock. So that was fantastic.
What's the lucky part?
Yeah. So I didn't even get to go to check out stitches. I didn't even have to go. Like Rosie ended up coming home and she did the best she could to take care of me. But I got to tell you, I had no idea that it was so aggressive out there on the mean courts of pickleball in West Hartford. It was probably the worst sports injury I've ever had. I hope I never have another situation like that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, geez. So do you have staples in your head now?
No, I wish I did. It's only two tiny little spots. It's crazy how like little the incision is, but how much it bled. I guess there's a lot of nerve endings or a lot of like capillaries and stuff in the top of your head. So it was
no idea what either of those things are, but I'll take you at your word on that. I mean, that is insane. I thought you were going to say like, yeah, I twisted my ankle and I'm a little sore and I actually like have been wearing a boot as a precautionary measure.
No.
Instead, you are. See, it's funny. Your reference was to a movie that I was unaware of. My reference was going to be Tyler Hansborough. For those that know college basketball, legendary UNC player who one of his iconic moments during his career was getting bloodied up, I believe, against Duke, but I could be wrong. And just like kind of powering through and kind of embracing it. He was like, I mean, he had like several screws loose in a good way. Love you, T. Hansborough. But anyways, yeah, that's scary, man. So you're on the mend. Like, do you feel okay now? Does Stefania need to come assess you?
Nah, I'm good to go.
Okay.
Actually, I'm ready to take Damian and I think are ready to take on you and Mike in pickleball next weekend, assuming that you guys aren't too scared to take us on.
I mean, I'm definitely scared, but I'm also open to do so. I just will bring a helmet for my own purposes. Yeah.
My buddy Scott texted me and he was like, these things don't happen when you just stay at home and play Call of Duty with me, which is a true story. So I can't fight with him on that one.
That's a great point, Scott. Well said by you.
All right, we're going to talk about some running backs. As we have been telling you guys, we got a huge mock draft exercise that we've been doing here at ESPN Fantasy. Big part of that field is kind of figuring out the way you want to approach the position. I think running back is one of those things, every position you have a strategy for, but running back is one of those things where there's a lot of different ways that you can approach drafting the running back position in fantasy football. I know how I've been doing it, but I want to tee you up first. When you're going into these mock drafts, do you have a specific strategy you're trying to follow, as in like a hero or zero RB, or are you just taking best player available based on who comes to you at the running back spot?
So I talked about this a few shows back, Daniel, and this was maybe over a month ago now. So apologies for not knowing exactly when it was, but I talked about how I am finding myself unafraid to go receiver early in drafts because of the capacity for 2-star receivers to carry a roster. I was just talking a few moments ago about how sometimes you're looking through the lens of one specific league. And that might have been a war room thought, because when you're playing with 16 teams and 2 flexes, it's possible for somebody to have 2 great running backs in a 16-team league. But there are oftentimes teams that advance far in a league like that have 1 good running back or even no good running backs, just because the depth of that position is so small. So in a 10-team league, and again, that's what we've been doing. We've been mocking 10-team drafts, mock drafts. Yep. And we are at, I think, 24 down, maybe 20 down. We've done a lot of these, obviously.
A lot of them, yeah.
What I have found myself thinking specific to running backs is, more often than not, but the board has to fall a certain way, more often than not, I am leaving with at least 1 running back in my first 2 picks, more often than not, just because in a 10-team league, it's possible for half the league to have good running backs, right? To have 2 good running backs. So if you're one of those that has 0 good running backs, you need to really have nailed those receiver picks. So I am tending to leave with at least 1 out of my first 2 picks being a running back, Daniel. And we talk about rushing quarterbacks all the time and how much of a cheat code they are. I am gravitating more and more and more each year that comes by towards running backs that have receiving upside. There's just way too much of it to not snag these players. As we talk about, and this was a stat that I can't remember who it was. It might have been Scott Barrett, who I think maybe sort of did the crunch the numbers on it here, Daniel. But something along the lines of every target is worth 2.4 carries in PPR scoring. And that number is going to change year over year. But basically, a target is more than twice as valuable as a carry on average for a player. Not every target's created equally, not every carry is created equally, but you get the general sense. So if I found myself finding at least 1 running back in my first 2 picks. And also, if I can, targeting a running back who has lots of receiving upside, which will, when we get to our most drafted backs, make a whole lot more sense.
Yeah, I really like the way that you say that. And when you look at the running backs in the top 10 field, the majority of them feel like they're doing some kind of pass catching for us right now, right? Yeah. What we saw last year with Raheem Mostert, he was kind of like Jamal Williams the year before. He is one of those non-pass catching running backs that just outperformed the touchdown perspective in order to get where he's at. But you look at CMC, Breece Hall, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, all of those guys, for a fact, they are premier pass catchers as well. I love being able to make sure I have at least one of those kind of through the first 2 rounds, like you had said. I want to kind of give you a list of people.
Okay.
Right. I realize we got 10 guys in the top 10. That's very simple. But when you're leaving the first 2 rounds, obviously you're good with CMC. You're good with Breece Hall. You're good with Bijan. You're good with Jahmyr Gibbs. Then we get to Kyren Williams, Saquon, Jonathan Taylor. You'd be fine leaving a draft with any of those guys as your RB1. Is that fair to say?
I would say that is absolutely fair.
Is there anyone else past that list? Do you put Derrick Henry in that list? Do you put Travis Etienne in that list? As I could leave this draft in the second round with one of these guys as my RB1.
Both of those guys would still be in the category of players that I would be happy with. I would be content with, I should say, as either of them being my RB1. Yes, but we're getting close. We're getting close to the border now, though, Daniel. We're getting close.
Isaiah Pacheco? Would you leave with Pacheco?
Still in the mix. I actually am I might be more bullish than most on Isaiah Pacheco this season, which we can discuss plenty of times between now and the start of the season. But yes, I am very much in on Isaiah Pacheco.
All right, so that kind of puts me in like the Josh Jacob, Joe Mixon range. Is that where things start to kind of fall off from the RB1 point?
So if you keep running a little bit further past that, like I think Jacobs I feel pretty good about. Mixon I feel solid about as my RB1. But like I'm starting to, you can hopefully sense it in my voice. Like, all right, you know what? Like, or you can kind of teetering, like, you know, like, because I know that if that's my RB1, my RB2 is really going to have to be a guy that I hit on and not somebody that I get unfortunate with.
Yep. I forgot to mention Devon Achane, but obviously Achane is a part of that list as well.
Yeah. Achane, and table this for August, Tyler, I know you will. Achane's got to be on the short list for trickiest players to rank in fantasy this year, right? Like my general sense, I'm just going to rank him really high because I think there's going to be enough explosive moments, but you're going to have to live with the ups and downs of Achane in some ways like you did last year, right? I think a smaller guy, more injury prone because of the size. And then on top of that, Daniel, for as amazing, and I'm talking about like nuclear as he was in his best moments last year, Mike Clay / regression history would tell us that he's probably not going to turn every game where he only has like 7 carries into 105 yards and a touchdown, right? Like there might be a game where he has 7 carries and they go for like 32 yards. And then what do you do, right? That's a tricky, inherently tricky sort of prototype for a player to rank going into the season.
Yeah, different players, but it's given me shades of Tony Pollard efficiency that it was so high the year before. And it's like, you know what? That efficiency is going to come down. Can they give him enough volume to be able to counteract that efficiency when that does happen, right, in this Dolphins offense? So kind of feeling that there as well. When you look at these guys, I want to ask you in the mock drafts that we have, is there one running back that you have drafted more than the others outside, like in that top 10 grouping of running backs?
Yes, and this is mostly trying to cater to the audience, which is you in this case on this Zoom. It's Jahmyr Gibbs, who I have drafted 8 times, more than any other running back in our mocks so far, Daniel, and 8 times all in the second round. So what that's, that's an indicator that like he's not going any sooner than pick 10. Very rarely if it's happening. But as great as Jahmyr Gibbs was last season, Daniel, I do think there are reasons to believe he's still kind of scratching the surface here. I mean, David Montgomery is not going to fade away. He's a big part of their offense. He's a big part of what I think it means to be a Detroit Lion. So I'm not ignoring that. Like, Dan Campbell just loves David Montgomery, tough nosed, tough, gonna like do some of the dirty work at the goal line. He's good. He's a good football player. I'm not denying that. But Gibbs, the involvement of the passing game should grow. And Daniel, like for as athletic as all these players are in the NFL, and like the worst athlete in the NFL is still like in the 99.9999999 percentile, Jahmyr Gibbs might be in like the top 3 percentile of NFL athletes, which means that like his carries are just built different. Like we're talking about the potential for, and the Lions called their shot with this when they drafted him 12th overall last year. We envisioned some Alvin Kamara type stuff. That might be what we're getting from Jahmyr Gibbs. So I love the pass catching upside. I like the idea that even if he doesn't get you 25 touches in a game, he only needs 15 in a game, which I think is a very reasonable average expectation for Jahmyr Gibbs. Like that's on the low end. 15 touches a game for Jahmyr Gibbs is going to equal a ton of big plays throughout the course of the year.
Totally agree. And this is a team, even though David Montgomery is the guy that you could easily look at and say, oh, he's going to be the goal line back, because he's got that bigger stature. He knows how to find his way in the end zone. They didn't shy away from using Jahmyr Gibbs in that same situation at times. So like Gibbs obviously has a ton of upside in this season. 2024 is going to be hopefully a huge year for him. My highest ranked player or highest drafted player so far, I got a handful of them, but I've mentioned it already before. JK Dobbins is the guy that I've drafted the most. I've drafted him 14
That's interesting.
times.
Yeah.
Big part of the reason field is just value. Can I just say that? Like, I'm getting him in rounds. I got him in round 11 3 times. I got him in round 12 8 times, and I got him in the 13th 3 more times. So like at that point, I feel like I'm grabbing what is an RB3 or probably more like an RB4 with a lot of upside in what should be a run-heavy offense. There's a ton of question marks. JK Dobbins obviously has a huge injury history that I am not ignoring. I am very aware of that. That's why he's not like my RB2 when I'm building out these hero RB builds. He's one of my depth pieces. But I think that there's a lot of upside if he's able to stay healthy within this Chargers offense. No offense to Gus Edwards, who's another guy that I've drafted a lot. But Gus Edwards is just kind of a guy. And I think J.K. Dobbins is a much more skillful running back. If he can be out there, he can be healthy and shed that injury-prone designation, he could have a very reasonable season, especially as a nice RB2 or flex play, I think, for fantasy managers super late in draft. So I've been grabbing him as just a dart throw, not a lot of investment. And Field, if it doesn't work out, like not having a 12th round pick hit, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, just to lay that out a step further, Dan, you said that 14 times. 14. 3 in round 11, 3 times in round 11, 8 times in round 12, and 3 times in round 13 for JK Dobbins. So to your point, like you don't lose your leagues because you whiff on round 11, 12, and 13. We often talk about how you don't frequently win your league in the draft, but you can lose it by, burning your first, second, or third round pick, or maybe a combination of those 3 picks on fire. So I'm okay with it. There's been some momentum going into training camp. The Gus Edwards is going to be the guy in this offense. He kind of falls more in line with the idea of what we're kind of assigning to be this Chargers identity, right? Guys who are tough, guys who can get, between the tackles yards. That being said, Daniel, if Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins get a comparable number of touches, I think J.K. Dobbins is a more talented runner. But at this point of the draft, it's kind of irrelevant because even if it doesn't work out, I'm not going to crush you for taking a guy all this many times. Have I taken him at all? I think I've taken him just a couple of times, but mostly because you've taken him in the other 14 times. So I haven't had the opportunity to get to him myself.
That's why. Yeah. I've seen Tristan Cockcroft also take him a couple times. So honestly, when you look at the majority of the running backs that I've drafted in the mocks, the guys I've drafted over and over, it's pretty obvious to me. I'm doing very much in on a hero RB build. I love grabbing one of those guys in the first or second round, like you had talked about, and then I'm waiting to get one of these other guys. David Montgomery, Zach Moss, Ezekiel Elliott. I'm waiting to get guys that I think I can wait farther on down the draft, hopefully have a large amount of volume within their offense. We'll see how things are going to work out with Zeke in Dallas. We've seen him do things. Who else is he splitting time with? Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn now?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some running backs that we want to avoid. Obviously, every single year, we're looking for upside. We're looking for guys that are going to do good things for our fantasy team. But part of that is also trying to decide which players do I not want to target in drafts because I don't think that they're going to live up to potential. Fields, you and I are doing an article for ESPN.com along with a bunch of our other writers talking about guys that we think could potentially bust at the running back position. Who did you have in 2024?
All right, so I have
downer alert, by the way. I hate talking negative about players, but downer alert.
But it's part of the job. I hope people understand that it's part of the job. They do. I did something, Daniel.
Uh-oh.
I shut down my Instagram DMs.
Whoa!
Because I'm about to say something unkind about Rachaad White. It was kind of perfect last year, Daniel. It was kind of perfect, right? So there have been other examples of this, but Rachaad White, if I were to tell you, just like who is your best guess in the NFL to have the second most carries in the entire league in a given season? Who are some of the names that come to mind? I'll start to throw some of my names. Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, right? Saquon Barkley.
Yep.
Those are just some of the examples. Last year, tied for second in carries with 272, Rachaad White.
Wow.
272 carries. And oh, by the way, as far as a receiving season goes, he had 64 catches, Daniel, on 70 targets. Let me do some math here. That's over a 90% catch rate. Yes, catch rate is higher for running backs, but he caught 91.4% of his targets. It was dump off city. And that's, some design stuff as well, but so much dump off city there. And Baker, that's the strength of his game. Like he's a super accurate quarterback and can really to sort of layer it beautifully. And especially in that short to intermediate game, he's got some good downfield ability as well, but he's a legit touch passer in the short to intermediate game. They drafted a fun player, Bucky Irving, out of Oregon in the 4th round this year, did the Bucs. And if you go back to the backfield depth chart last year, it was like Chase Edmonds, and I know our producer extraordinaire Jackson is on the podcast, but Sean Tucker from Syracuse.
That's right.
They actually they needed Rachaad White to play 80% of the snaps, handle 80% of the carries, and handle 80% of the running back targets. I think that number is going to drop, Daniel, to like 60. And I know Rachaad White's not going as like RB5 or RB6 where he finished last year. He's going 38th overall. He's going as let's see. I have to see where this ranks amongst running backs. Sorry for the bad podcasting here. He's going as RB15. I think the possibility of him sliding to like RB25 is in play.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everything that you just sort of lined up makes a lot of sense. I couldn't believe, I just pulled it up while you're looking at that, the number of touches he had. CMC led the league with 339 touches, and Rachaad White was second with 336. Only 3 fewer touches than CMC.
Just say that again, Daniel. One more time. Say that again.
Rachaad White had 3 fewer touches than Christian McCaffrey in 2023.
Just you ask yourself if that's likely to happen again, right? And so people are going to say, like, well, if he's going RB15, like some of the names that are going behind Rachaad White, just some that I think could be better players this year, include Josh Jacobs, right? Like, pretty darn good player, you know?
Yes.
Kenneth Walker III, pretty darn good player right there. Like, you know, some stuff's going to have to break right for some of these guys as well. But like, you know, David Montgomery, like, just always has a super high floor. I just am more scared of the floor dropping out for a guy like Rachaad White than I am other guys in this category as well.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense, and it's a real good argument, Field. The guy that I'm worried about the floor dropping out of is a guy who's had the floor drop every year since 2019, unfortunately, and that is Aaron Jones. He has scored less fantasy points every single season since 2019. Last year, only 12.9 fantasy points per game. That was on a Green Bay team, by the way, that was 11th in scoring. And I think that Green Bay offense was actually pretty good, led by Jordan Love. I mean, there was some things that you could do there. Now he's in Minnesota with a rookie quarterback in JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold. We're not sure which one it's going to be. They're not going to have TJ Hawkinson for at least a good part of the season. We're going to have to wait and see what's going on now with this Jordan Addison situation. Last year, Minnesota was 22nd in scoring. I feel like we're in a spot where Aaron Jones may get a ton of dump-off passing game work potentially if we find out they're going to have more time without Jordan Addison in this Vikings offense. But I don't think this offense is better than what he played in last year. I don't think the line is better than what he played behind last year. And I think that the quarterback that he's playing with is going to be worse than the quarterback that he played with last year. I mean, all of those things add up to me to a guy that even if I like Aaron Jones, given that he has seen a downturn in fantasy production every single year, and he's now on a worse team with a worse quarterback, it just makes it tough for me to feel confident investing in him as a substantial part of my fantasy team.
Yeah, so I'm still more in on Aaron Jones than you are, Daniel. I think he's such a good player, and I will say that the receiving capacity helps him.
That could be huge.
Yep, that helps. It just creates a higher floor. But we have talked about this with Mike a million times, and I don't want to crush. We always have fun with Mike. We're goofing around when we talk about this, and you know the age thing. But if you're looking for like the indicator on running backs, like at some point that it just the age hit these guys, and it seems to be much harsher at running back than it is at a lot of other spots. He'll be 29. Sorry, he is 29. He'll be 30 on December 2nd. Now, maybe this is because running backs just aren't getting paid that much, but he got a 1-year, $7 million deal. And by the way, Daniel, the Packers made a big bet themselves. Like, it wasn't like they cut Aaron Jones and said, like, we're just going to go the, like, modest money route at running back. Mm-hmm. They cut Aaron Jones because they signed Josh Jacobs to a 4-year, $48 million deal, right? Like,
big deal. Huge deal.
So, yeah. So I bring all this up to say that, like, if Aaron Jones has the age regression, we should not be surprised. And Mike Clay, maybe he was half a year too early on it, but Mike tends to have pretty good logic behind his picks.
Agreed. I'm with you on that. All right, we're going to do a quick rapid-fire game here, Field, the bust meter, Sweet. All right? I'm going to run through a list of players that everybody else at ESPN Fantasy has as their busts for 2024 at the running back position, and let me know if you agree or disagree on a scale of 1 to 10 with where these guys are at.
Sweet.
Got Kyron Williams from the Rams.
So would 1 be I agree strongly, or would 10 be I agree strongly?
10 would be I agree strongly. 1 is I disagree strongly.
Yeah, I'll go 2. Maybe I'll call it 3. He will be like Rachaad White in the sense that his workload decreases this year. But I think Kyren Williams is a really good player. Like, I was impressed with what I saw from him last season as a runner mostly, and Sean McVay has loved this guy for a while.
All right, former Bears safety Matt Bowen has Tony Pollard.
Yeah, I mean, I said it earlier, like, I'm going to go with like 2.5 because of the place you're drafting him, right? You told me it was ADP. So 2.5 just because of ADP.
I'm with you on that. Mike Clay's got Devon Achane because he hates fun and explosive plays.
I know, but it's a good call. So I'll go with 6 just because, like, Daniel, where he's going right now. Oh, I just closed my ADP page. But where he is going right now, like, you can just get so much more certainty. If you're risk averse, then I think this is a good opportunity for you to bypass a player like Devon Achane because there's just no way he copies his efficiency from last season.
Yeah, he's coming off the board in the 3rd round in our
look at that, look at that. Like, guys going behind Devon Achane. Again, he's awesome. He is such a good football player. But, I can't get the running back page pulled up right now. Let's see if I can do it in a second. God, this is great. This is such good podcasting right here. If you can get the running backs up, Achane's going ahead of,
he's going ahead of Rachaad White,
right?
Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs. Yep.
Kenneth Walker. So, he's much higher upside than any of those guys, but, like, he might have half the touches. He might have a third of the rushing attempts of Josh Jacobs.
Yes, I totally agree. I was just going to say that 100%. And you are at that point. That's the part that makes me nervous, like I said earlier on, because it's almost like I'm banking on that efficiency that just likely shouldn't be as efficient as it was again 2 years in a row, right? Like, give me touches over that. All right. Tristan H. Cockcroft has Alvin Kamara from the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I think this one's I'm going 5 as well. This is age. So basically what you said about Aaron Jones, like, copy and paste that because age is catching up to Alvin Kamara despite the fact that he wants a new contract from the Saints.
Yeah, not on a great team, and but he is a great pass catcher. That's one of the things that continues, just like Aaron Jones, to be able to elevate his fantasy production for us. Both Tyler Fulgham and I have Aaron Jones. We already talked about him really quickly. Eric Carabell had Tony Pollard. You already had mentioned him. And then Liz Loza also has Rachaad White. And
Liz, arguably probably one of the better hires from ESPN in the past decade. Just one of the brilliant fantasy football minds. Who'd she have?
She had Rachaad White.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, gosh. Yeah. Weird. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Last one we had was Eric Moody with Javonte Williams. How do you feel about that?
I'm going low here. I'm going low again. I'm going to same sort of argument as before. I'm going 2 because he's going to the 11th round. Right? He's going 105th overall, running back 33. So your expectations can be modest, and mine are. I mean, that's why he's ranked where he is, Daniel. And like, again, if he stinks this year, and if he's inefficient like he was last season when last year he averaged 3.6 yards per carry and had just 3 rushing touchdowns. If that happens again this year, Daniel, with the addition of Audric Estime and, Samaje Perine still being kind of a factor there for them in the passing game, I'd be like, okay, well, I used 11th round pick on him.
Yep. I'm totally with you on that. I'm totally with you. All right, let's have a little bit of fun then. We'll close this show out with a little bit of fun. We got 5 minutes here. Rather than talk about busts that we have, let's talk about some sleepers or late round gems that we like. Obviously, if I'm looking at guys, 0 RB builds, right? I've got to grab some of these running backs in the later rounds that I hope are going to pay off for me. At what point of the draft do you think you can start saying someone is a sleeper? Is that like a 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th round? How deep do you have to get?
I will allow sleeper to be defined differently for this reason, Daniel. There used to be a time where I would ask someone for a fantasy football sleeper, or I guess someone would ask me, and I'd give them a name that they were like, I have never heard of this person before, right?
Yeah.
Now, every player in every round has got 7 TikTok fan pages dedicated to them, right? You're like, wow, like I just checked out the Travis Homer TikTok fan club, and it is like voluminous, right? So I think I'm open to more interpretations for sleepers because it might be like, hey, this is a guy who's going in the 4th round and deserves to go in the 1st round, right? Or a guy that's could pay off. So I will allow you to define your own rules. Mine's a little bit of a later round pick, and I've said this many times. I've talked about this player. He may have 0 value for a half of this season, but I think there is a good chance he will get his opportunity. when he gets the opportunity, Daniel, I think Trey Benson's going to be a stud. He is too good of a player to have lasted until the third round of the NFL draft. And I think he's too good of a player for the Cardinals to not rely upon him. And as we've said 1,000 times, let's make it 1,001. James Conner has never, ever played a full season. If history holds again this year, Trey Benson will be a starter. And I think for a pocket of games, I keep using that term pocket, I think he'll be a really, really good player who would have like top 20-ish value in a week in which he's a starter.
He has missed at least 4 games in 3 of the last 4 seasons, James Conner has. So it's a situation. And by the way, we had talked about it. He just turned 29. He will not be 30 until next year, but James Conner getting up there in age, and he has certainly dealt with his own share of injury issues. My sleeper for 2024 is going to be Jahmyr White, Field.
Ooh.
I think he's just in a spot right now where Josh Jacobs leaves, and Jacobs has just been the guy for that backfield for so long. But we watched Jahmyr White come in. They drafted him. We saw him at the tail end of last year, actually, have a couple of games where he gave us some nice fantasy value at the final few weeks of the season. And a lot of this is anecdotal for me, Field. Tell me if this is crazy. But if I'm the Raiders, and I've got Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew under center, I want to run the ball. I want to use as much clock as I possibly can. I've got a top 10 defense on the other side.
Yeah, I'm not going to allow you to say that, Daniel, because that would mean that Brock Bowers, I've been drafting a lot of, does not pay off. And Jacoby Myers, who I've been drafting a ton of, does not pay off. And Devontae Adams has to go through another year of purgatory.
I hope that doesn't happen. Devontae Adams has had 170 targets 3 straight seasons. Like, he's the one guy that's just like,
player he is, man.
It doesn't make a difference who his quarterback is. The guy is just unreal. But with Jahmyr White, I feel like in this situation, if you're operating under the idea that the Raiders, in order to try and stay competitive, part of the thing they're going to have to do, especially in the AFC West, is keep the ball out of other teams' hands. A way that you do that is by utilizing the running game, your offensive line, and relying on your good defense. I definitely think that Jahmyr White, given the new situation that he's in, by the way, the team added Alexander Mattison. That doesn't do a whole lot for me. I'm not super worried about Alexander Mattison stealing meaningful touches away from Jahmyr White after what we saw, unfortunately, in Minnesota last year.
You kind of referenced this, but if you haven't seen Jahmyr White on Instagram,
he's huge.
He is the largest person I've ever seen in my entire life.
It's like
Jack.
A.J. Dillon's
He's huge.
Thighs were transplanted to Jahmyr White's biceps, is what it looks like.
Yes. Often, again, my frequently mentioned doppelganger for my body is Jahmyr White, except the exact opposite.
Yeah, right. That's super fair. All right. Last question I'm going to ask you to close out the running back show, Field. When you're looking at these late round guys, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to take dart throws on potential backups on other teams in case they get a starting job? Or do you like trying to grab the guy that's behind the guy you've already drafted so that no matter what happens, I've got the starting running back of whatever team I drafted?
Yeah, I tend to go towards the player that's the better player. That's my, I evaluate the player much more so than I already have, this would be a bad example. I have Joe Mixon already, so let me go ahead and grab Dameon
Pierce. Yep.
Pierce. I lean towards is Dameon Pierce better than, again, a Bucky Irving or something like that? Whoever the backup, whoever you want to discuss, a backup everywhere else.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. And that's kind of the way that I look at it, because I don't want to just assume, especially in season long, if I'm doing, best ball, I'm like 40 drafts deep in best ball right now. And that's a totally different setup.
Totally.
But I definitely think if I'm looking at these guys outside of best running back available, I would rather have the chance to hit big somewhere else. And I just limit my upside. If it's okay, I'm going to grab Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd. Well, I can't have both of them be top running backs for me, because as long as Josh Jacobs is healthy, Lloyd is just relegated to the bench. So
totally.
In that scenario, I'd rather grab Josh Jacobs and Blake Corum or pick somebody else in that situation.
Yep. Fair.
All right, buddy. This was a ton of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Thanks everybody for indulging. Let's cross that bridge when we get to it. But thanks everybody who may have heard various dogs running in and out of this room right now. We're dog friendly in all ways. And we are. The dogs, So anyways, if they came in and they bothered you, sorry. They didn't bother me.
No, they didn't bother me either, Field. You got great puppers. All right. We're going to be back next week with some wide receiver conversation. Going to do the same thing. Until then, don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself, guys. And make sure you wear your seatbelt. And put on sunscreen this week. Holy smokes. It's going to be real hot in the Northeast.
Yes, it is.
Love you guys. We'll see you next week.